right, welcome back to the podcast. Today we have a very special guest on. Today we have Joe Hahn, who's a former DEVGRU, medically retired. He is the director of training for GBRS Training Group, and then he also is a scuba volunteer instructor for Warfighter Scuba. Joe, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Ethan, for having me. I appreciate it, man.
Hey, man, it's great to see you. That's the formal introduction. We'll get into it. All right, bro. So we'll kind of start from the history here. What got you into the SEAL teams? Like, where did you grow up, and then what was like, hey, man, I just got to go be, Charlie Sheen.
Oh, man, the SEAL teams wasn't even on my radar growing up. I grew up in foster homes across Texas from about 5 years old till I graduated high school. Got accepted to Texas A&M. I was actually looking to be a doctor. I was going to be a pediatrician. Originally, my mom died of cancer when I was about 4. And so I was, growing up as a kid, I wanted to be the guy that cured it. So I was interested in the medical field. Did really well in school despite moving around. I lived in 30, 40 foster homes growing up.
No shit.
Graduated high school, went to Texas A&M University, the pre-med program. And then 9/11 actually happened. Kind of shifted my whole perspective. Being young at the time and fit and healthy, I was like, I want to go fight for my country. And I can always come back to school. Figured that smart as I felt anyways, that I could finish college at any time, but to serve my country was something that it's a young man's game. As I'm older now, I know that for sure. But started doing research on the military. My first choice was Marines, believe it or not, because my dad was a Marine, my cousin. And then I stumbled across some of the special operations, special forces type guys. And the Navy SEALs came up. Their legacy from Vietnam was legendary. And the fact that they did combat swimmer, also known as combat diving, interested me because I always wanted to scuba dive as a kid. And I was like, hey, I can go to the teams, learn how to scuba dive, and be a part of one of the greatest units in my mind through all the research I did up to that point. So I chose the Navy SEAL route. Went straight to the Navy recruiter and said, hey, this is what I do. I want to go to BUDS. And that was about October, November 2001.
So that was like right out the gate. You're like,
yep. I was a sophomore. Yep. I was a freshman at the time, working on campus at Texas A&M as a bus driver, believe it or not, and going to school. They put me on the delayed entry program because of the job I wanted, because you had to have a job before you went to BUDS in case you quit. The job I wanted was like a 2-year wait. They put me on the delayed entry program, kind of signed me up. There's a big influx of guys signing up after 9/11. So I got a spot and I just kind of worked out and got in shape and bought my time until I shipped off to boot camp in October 2003.
What was that like? It's different nowadays. Like I just did a video with a buddy of mine. I can't remember what YouTube channel it was, but they're like, I described my pipeline going into, being a scout sniper, and it's always different for everybody. What was that like back then? Because we lived through that era. Like you just don't Google like Navy SEAL pipeline, you know what I mean? And then it's like, and then if you're picking books up, sometimes the books talk about it, sometimes they don't, especially like Vietnam era, that's completely another era. Like, how did you train up? I'm really interested in like, what was your training regimen to like, where did you go? Did you just like head it through? Like, I'm just going to fucking swim as hard as I can, cause now you can go on Instagram or you can pay for a program and they work. Like I've done a few of those myself, like years ago. And it's very designed for certain special operations selections. Like, what did you find? Because like it's one thing to do, Marine recon. It's like, but Navy SEAL BUDS though. I mean, that's another. You guys, the way you guys are swimming, holding your like, that's a lot to take in. Like, where did you go for that type of information?
Man, the library, Barnes and Nobles, bookstores. Because, like you said, there was no real internet back in 2001. It was just kind of infancy and stuff like that. And most of that stuff was either posters or whatnot. Man, and I stumbled across a book called Hell Week, which described Hell Week in very intense detail. And it sounded miserable. I wasn't very in shape as a college kid. I was like 145, 6 foot tall. the most athleticism that I did was team sports, and I really didn't commit to most of that physically anyways, and mentally. It was just like, hey, I'm from Texas, I got to play football. So I wasn't really a starter or anything fancy like that. I went to a really small town called Lomita, had like 800 people there. We played 6-man football and just started touching on 11-man football before I left. So yeah, no, at college I was just going to classes and working. And then when I decided to do the Navy route, the recruiter kind of looked at me and was like, hey, you probably got to do some fitness stuff. I couldn't even do a single pull-up, believe it or not, when I started training. Barely could run a mile. I think I maxed out the first time I did push-ups was like 25. And that was, October 2001 after I talked to a recruiter. And I was like, fuck, I got to do something.
I was going to say, that's going to hit you pretty hard in the face. You're like, yeah, I can do it. And you're like, oh, fuck.
No, I went and jumped on that pull-up bar. I hung on. It's probably like 15, 20 seconds, and I slipped right off. My grip was crap. And I was like, man, I got a ways to go. I got to do at least 6. So, no, I spent every day training. Actually got a workout book. I still have it on my bookshelf over there. The Navy SEAL workout program by give me 1 second, I'll give it to you. I'll show it to you. Oh, the Navy SEAL workout by DeLeslie. Of course, I had some shirtless frogman on the front of it climbing the O course. So this thing, I followed it. Had a push-up pyramid program, pull-ups, swim program, run program. And I did that whole thing. Kind of saw the increase. I was a decent swimmer. I didn't do it competitively, but I always enjoyed it. Yeah. But being at the Texas A&M kind of afforded me, good gym, good pool, good places to train, and it was just body weight stuff constantly. I didn't really hit any weights or anything. And everything I read that I got a hold on was it's physical, constant running, constant push-ups, constant this. So that's all I trained really. The pipeline was kind of different. Buds and SEALs now it's actually an actual rate. You can actually get straight into a prep program. I actually got out of shape at boot camp because we were an integrated division, so we couldn't do more than 20 push-ups at a time. And man,
I heard about that from other buddies.
It was tough because my Navy PT test, I crushed it. I ended up getting like 120 push-ups in 2 minutes, about 115, 110 sit-ups. In the 1.5-mile run, God, I can't remember, but I was flying past everybody. I was super overly prepared for buds, but I didn't expect not being able to constantly work out for that 8 weeks at Great Lakes. So, they had the dive motivator program, but that was like a small piece of it because you had to do all the regular Navy stuff. The attrition rate was, it still is, it's pretty high. So the Navy wanted to make sure they could use you. Because if not, if you went straight to buds and quit or dropped out or washed out, you were basically undesignated and you had to chip paint and have to send you back to another school. So I was going to do the corpsman route, but then they kept, with the delayed entry program, they kept pushing me. I was like, well, what do we have available? Like, what's the shortest one you got? And like Master at Arms, which is, Navy's military police, 6 weeks in San Antonio. I was like, sweet, I'll do that. That's 6 weeks in Texas. So I can go home on the weekends and go straight to buds after that. I went through the 6-week program down at Lackland Air Force Base. Went to San Diego and started in doc phase.
Nice. So, and then how long did it take you from signing the papers to getting to buds? Like, was that like 6-8 months, or was that,
So signing the papers, I did the workout programs with the recruiter. They always did the PT test. They wanted to make sure that guys were going, actually stuck with it because, it's not like commercialized as it is now. So if guys want to do specialty jobs, they wanted to make sure they weren't wasting time. Yeah. So signing the paperwork, so I went to buds, was a decent long time just because of the delayed entry. But the day I joined the Navy, October 2003, I was at San Diego by like February 2004.
Oh, so it's a pretty fast turnaround then.
Yeah. So went to the 8 weeks boot camp, went to 6 weeks to A school. So went MOS, basic stuff. The other units call it. And I went straight out to buds. I did the minimum amount of leave I did for Thanksgiving and Christmas and enrolled right into San Diego.
Nice. So did you, right when you got there, did you make it all the way through the pipeline, or did you recycle it all, or?
So I got injured in Hell Week, so I started in class 251. Had like Tuesday, Wednesday of Hell Week. The log in the boat bouncing on my head kind of did something funny with the nerve in my neck and my shoulder.
Oh,
Caused my whole arm to go numb. They said it like a pinched nerve or something, and it was scary because when I first gone through it, I couldn't move my arm, couldn't feel it, and they're like, "Hey, this could last 2 weeks, this could last 2 months, this could last the rest of your life." It's one of those things we're just gonna have to monitor and put you through physical therapy and see where it goes. Luckily, it was just a 2 week route, so I got rolled into 252, started over from day one, week one, in the in-dock phase, and with that class, I made it all the way through.
yeah. Is that a little bit easier? Like, I mean, it sucks to
The second
re-roll,
time,
but
well,
like you just
and
know mentally, like, all right, we know what like the fear of the unknown slightly goes away. You kind of, yeah, I've been through it before. Or does it just
yeah,
suck? I mean, it sucks,
no,
but
it sucked, but the fear of the unknown wasn't there. Like I knew what to
Mhm,
expect through end doc phase, through the first 3 weeks,
mhm,
through at least Wednesday of Hell Week,
yeah,
so it wasn't no big surprise. Some of the big evolutions or the shitty ones where you're like, fuck, man, is this ever going to end? Because some of those evolutions are designed to make you think if it'll ever end.
hmm,
I kind of knew they would end because I'd been through it once.
yeah.
They still sucked just as bad.
Yeah, we always going through all the shit we went through. We always called it. The motivation was you can't stop time.
Yeah.
Like even the small shit, and then like the big. We had a hell week in sniper school, but it wasn't obviously to the extent that you guys had. But we had the same thing. It was just like guys were just down on their luck. We had 100-pound packs on running the flight line in Bellows in Hawaii, and I remember thinking, God, this fucking sucks. But at the end of the day, it ends. Like it's going to, like, you can't stop time. The instructors can't stop the clock, no matter how painful it kind of gets. That's what we always told ourselves. So I mean, if you take that mentality, it's like you just can't stop time. It's not going to
Yeah.
stop.
No, there
Like
was definitely
it
one of those
will
things.
end.
It's
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
I was like, there's always a next evolution, and they can't beat us forever in this one instance. So
yeah. They
no,
got to
yeah,
see
for
it
sure. The
sometime.
whole I never thought about it. You can't stop time deal, but I was like, this is, even though they say it's never going to end, it has to end because we can't be stuck here doing this forever.
Yeah,
So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, what was kind of like your hardest part, or that you struggle with the most going through buds? Was it like the underwater stuff? Was it the swimming, the running?
uh, man, everything was hard for me. Like
Hmm,
I said, I wasn't really athletic. Some of those guys,
hmm,
we had Olympic athletes in our class, guys that
hmm,
did phenomenal athletic stuff in college.
hmm,
Um, yeah, I was pretty average, I want to say, but on the lower end of average. Like
hmm,
everything was a put out evolution. Like that was always my thing was, man, I got to do the best I can because I don't want to fail this evolution no matter what. So I never
hmm.
made any like leaderboards or honor man or anything, but man, I always completed everything and always passed it, which was always a good thing. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, I
doctor
mean
with a C
the whole
average is
thing.
still doctor.
Yeah, exactly. No, I try not to, suck in any way, but always gave it all my all.
Hmm,
I mean, first phase is just designed to suck the worst,
hmm,
but after Hell Week, things were more training kind of oriented and less just suck factor. I mean, the
hmm.
suck factor still was there. Um, yeah, I don't know. Like growing up in the foster care system, uh, life sucked in general. So going through
Hmm,
buds and stuff, it was kind of a breath of fresh air, kind of seeing the camaraderie, the brotherhood that kind of formed
hmm,
during that deal, like suffering together.
hmm.
I went through a lot of suffering by myself as a kid, so it was a different mentality and a different type of world, but I embraced it. I enjoyed it
Yeah,
more than most, I guess.
yeah, yeah. So I guess the real question is how many Instagram influencers did you know going through your Buds
Zero.
training?
I mean, Instagram wasn't even a thing, man.
Or that
Facebook,
ended up being Instagram influencers.
man,
I
probably a
had to do
decent
it.
amount.
I had to do
Um, Probably a
it.
decent amount.
Yeah, yeah.
Now we had some about 30 guys that made it through the Buds
Hmm,
pipeline with us that started with us. So
hmm.
they all did various things in the teams. Luckily,
Yeah,
none of
yeah.
them did anything super boneheadish, but
Hmm, hmm.
uh,
What was we actually I remember watching and it might be DJ. Were they in that documentary? It was pre 9/11. and it was Discovery Channel. And I remember everyone watching it. We watched it. I remember watching it in 2008. I was like, oh, this is pretty fun to watch. And that was like the first time I think the Navy had done like almost beginning to end buds training, or like, documented it. And they had the youngest SEAL, which was, I think, 17. Was that DJ? I heard something about that
Yeah,
he was the
so
youngest.
DJ, so that Discovery Channel deal, they actually released that right when I started my Navy career. And so I didn't get to watch it until after I got through. It probably would have deterred me because it looked like it sucked way worse in person than reading in that book.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, I don't think DJ was in that documentary, but he was in a few of the picture stuff because they took pictures of his buds class. It was him, Will Chesney, who wrote with the dog handler that was at squadrons with me, and a couple other guys that were previously to the Discovery Channel course. But DJ was the youngest guy. I remember, if you ever heard his story, he was getting in trouble in high school, and his dad took him to the recruiter office, signed a paper. I don't think he finished his senior year, or he kind of did it on whatever, remotely or whatever. But he was I think still the youngest guy that's been through so far.
Okay, because I just remember in that documentary they had the youngest, and he was like 7. So DJ might have beat him by a few months. Because I think in that documentary there was like, I remember watching, and they were like, this kid's fucking 18 or 17 or some ridiculously, like finished high school early, or however that worked out, or I do remember that. That's what's kind of curious, because I remember you telling me about that, about DJ.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't be able to do it at 17. I turned 21 at boot camp in the Navy. So for my 21st birthday, I did some push-ups. No more than 20, obviously, because
you couldn't get the 21.
The females couldn't do more than 20.
Yeah.
But no, at 17, my mindset wasn't in it. I wasn't even thinking about being tough and in the Navy. So it was impressive to hear some of those guys that were coming straight out of high school going, I've been training this forever. And I was like, man, I only started like a year and a half ago. So hopefully I make it through.
We had one of my wrestling coach. There's some kid at the school that we wrestled at. He became a SEAL, but he remembered that kid. He always wanted to get him to come out for wrestling, because he was like working out all the time, like through the whole high school. They'd see him in the gym all the time, and they always tried to get him to join the wrestling team, to be like, hey, like, this will help you, like, with how much wrestling sucks and how painful that can be, with the cutting weight, and then just as hard as you push your body. And the guy was like, I'm good. He went and he made it, and he came back, but he also was, I remember him telling Jimmy, he was like, I kind of wish I would have got through wrestling, because it would have been a little less painful.
Yeah, I wish they offered wrestling when I was in high school. But majority of the guys that I've noticed have some type of wrestling background. Like wrestling at all the sports that guys do suck the worst, because it is a lot of like self-discipline and mental stuff to get through, because it's all on your own kind of deal. Football had 2-a-days and stuff, but like cutting weight, making the work class, and just that combative mindset, I think it helps most guys.
Yeah, exactly. And the guys that I'd known gone through too were wrestlers, or that the success rate was a little bit higher.
Yeah.
I know my buddy, well, sadly Brinker passed away, but he was a wrestler out of Pennsylvania. He was actually Marine Corps scout sniper, left, became a SEAL after that.
Oh, wow.
And whatnot. And back in 2010 or 11, I believe, or 2008 or 9. So, but yeah, so then you graduate and you go to the teams. Now you hit it just right then. So when did you graduate buds? I mean, that was what, 02, 03?
No. So rolling back, because buds is a 6-month process. They have space in between each class. So I graduated buds officially February 2005. And then we had advanced training, so SEAL qualification training, which was another 6 months. That sucked just as much, but just, they still was like, hey, you don't have your trident yet, so you can still get dropped from this training, but you perform and you show up and you don't suck, then you'll be good to go into a team. So I got my trident August 2005. I got assigned to SEAL Team 5 right when they got back from Iraq.
And how many pumps did you do then to Iraq?
Pumps,
that height, that pumps.
It's funny because you said pumps. So the West Coast guys, when I was at Team 5, so all the odd numbers are on the West Coast, even numbers on
Mm-hmm.
the East Coast. The West Coast guys, we called them pumps as well. So we did
Mm-hmm.
two pumps or rotations to Iraq,
Mm-hmm.
and that was pretty good. My first one was kind of Habaniya and Rawa type deal in '05. And we touched base and did some stuff in Ramadi as well. And then my second rotation was in Fallujah. Was that oh 08? Yeah, oh eight
Oh
oh
wait.
nine. Yeah.
No, no shit. Because I was there in to February 08. So July to February, or July 07 to February 08.
Yeah.
We worked the Fallujah provinces, I should say. Not
Yeah.
We were out of Camp Fallujah, the snipers, and then each team we had a direct support team, and I was part of Lima Company. We were over in Garma most of the time. Yeah, and then we worked in Zaydan, which I can't remember what we were. 85 Charlie, I think 80. I can't remember who handled Zaydan, and then Omar. We only did one op in like Omar, I think it was, but
Yeah.
Garma was our main one. But I know for us it dried up pretty quick. But we can't, that it was frustrating for us as snipers because we were like, we can go somewhere else and try to kill people, and they're like, nah, we're gonna have you sweep for weapons caches in the. It just went off the rails. So like, and not in a bad way. It was just like we were the first unit to ever bring everyone home alive. So
nice.
like,
wow.
so it's a good thing, luckily. But like when they saw that, and they kind of hunkered everybody down, they wouldn't let us run missions into. Like they wouldn't pimp us out, which was what we wanted, hey, attach us to the SEALs or attach us to anybody that's getting into some shit. And they just were like, no, we're not doing that.
Yeah.
So
no, we always had the Christmas deployments, I called them. So we deploy from like September, October till about April. And yeah, we miss all the holidays. But yeah, the first deployment wasn't too bad. Halfway through, I went up north. We stood up a cop there in Rawa there. And then the second one was decent. It's kind of the same thing. We were running out of all the good hot missions, but we still got some stuff. We actually split up and met some guys up. I want to say we went to Solder City for a little bit on my second part of the deployment. They were standing up some stuff up there as well, and we're providing overwatch for some of the Army engineers and stuff like that, messing with the wall and whatnot.
Yeah. So what was that? I mean, like, that was kind of, did you kind of expect them, like, or what did you expect working in the SEAL teams? Like,
man, I expected stepping off the helicopter, Vietnam style, getting shot at. And, I definitely got messed with a little bit as a new guy, make sure I had my gun ready and my body armor on. So we land in Al Assad. And we went over the bridge, and of course, I'm thinking we're going to get contacted any second for like the first week or so. Just kind of the mentality I had, but it was I say decently chill. But no, we worked at night. Always going out, hitting targets, and it wasn't as hair raising as the guys' deployment before I joined the teams because they were in Fallujah before, and the heat of everything. So that was 04, 05 when those guys first went out, and Fallujah was hot about that time. I got a few good missions, but nothing like I expected. I was expecting to go out, 2-3 times a night kind of deal. But no, we had some good gym time and did some decently good missions, so it wasn't too bad.
So then I've heard the kind of the saying, you guys, what is it? You put your packet in or you get out, for the old DEVGRU. So at what point were you like, I want to continue doing this? And
I got done with my first deployment to Iraq, came back. The cycle is about 18 months, or it was about 18 months. It's changed now, but it said, you get back, you have your leave and your downtime, and then you start doing your workup again. And on the regular teams, it's pretty lengthy. During that workup process, like DEVGRU wasn't even on my radar. I remember my first LPO. He was like, we're doing just as good a stuff as they are over there. So, you better be lucky you're in San Diego and not sucking it up in Virginia Beach. And I was like, oh, okay. But we did a training block over at Development Group with some squadron guys there. And one of them was Dusty Markham, who died overseas actually, but he was a team leader there at one of the squadrons. Kind of knew some of the, went to buds with one of the LPOs that we were with. So we show up in their squadron space, and he has all these pictures laid out. And he goes, there was probably 200-300 pictures of dead guys, and he's all, these are all the guys we targeted in the last 3-month deployment. And I was all doing the math, and I was like, man, I was like, yeah, they were actually going out 2-3 times a night, and I was like, man, this is what I want to do. I didn't come to the teams to kind of just be satisfied with what's going on. I wanted to actually go hunt bad guys. And I was like, how do I get in this? How do I get here? And like, what do I need to do? And like, well, this is a screening process. You have to have a good reputation. It's more than just, being physically fit. You have to be an actually good team guy and not be a fuck up. So I put all my packet stuff in, said, hey, I want to do it. Luckily, my master chief at the time was a former squadron guy. And he helped me through the process, kind of liked who I was as a person. He signed off on me, did the screening process. So they would bring out guys. They did, the physical PT test. They want to make sure that as a team guy, you were staying in shape, because some guys unfortunately would get their trident and they'd call it good, But the old adage, earn your trident every day, was something that I actually tried to adhere by. So to be in such a prestige organization, I was like, man, I got to act like I belong here and fit in, not just say, hey, this is what I am, and have to argue with some chick in a coffee shop because I'm overweight that I am a team guy,
Yeah.
So
not to bring it up, I did see that at the Fallujah Trow Hall one time. I was like, no fucking way. Like it clearly he was like he looked like he was a power lifter.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But it was like, dude, like I know you're strong, but there's no fucking way that you're running. You know what I mean? Like I was, he had to try and I was like, those are the, and he clearly had the guys that were, in shape. Yeah. And he was an older guy, bald, and he was just yoked. But at the same time, I'm like, there's no way, man, that you're going to make it down that alleyway in a sufficient amount of time, but yeah.
No, there's definitely nothing against the guys that were in, but some of the guys, the further they got in their career, the more relaxed they got. And it was just, I was like, man, I don't want to be a E6, E7 kind of looking like that. I don't want to be the guy that's going, I'm not doing PT this Friday because I'm going to show up late and do other stuff. So no, I talked to that team leader, and he gave me, the route, talked to my master chief that was at my command. He helped me with my packet process, and I applied and screened positive. And so they said, after your next Iraq deployment, because I was scheduled to deploy, they're like, hey, you can screen now or you can wait. I was like, after my deployment, obviously I want to go with my guys and try to kick some shit in. So my second deployment to Iraq, after that, I went straight on to Green Team for the screening process. That was like 2009.
2009, okay. Because we saw Green Team training over in Moyoc when I was working with Blackwater, or I call them Blackwater, but they were Z at the time. Actually, I think they were IDS at the time, depending on what program you were on. Yeah. And we saw, we were like, who the fuck are these guys? Because like we drive to the sniper range, and then they were working out, and like, CrossFit was huge. This was 2012. Yeah. So it was like CrossFitting going through, it was like a line, and that was like, this is weird. Why is there group PT going on? Because you're like, you big boy rules, everybody works out on their own. So it's like, who the fuck is working out during this morning PT? We're contractors, so like, fuck that. Like we're going to the range, homie. We're getting paid. Yeah. And it was kind of cool. We found out our instructor was a SEAL, and he was like, oh, that's Green Team. And I was like, oh, okay. And then he kind of walked us through. And then one of our head instructors was one of the OG guys from DEVGRU way back in the day. And he was telling us some fun stories. And but we were just on the sniper lanes. And then below us was the CQB course. So we got to see Green Team. And we were there for like a month. So we'd see them every day. Yeah. Just going through, with heart monitors and all that stuff. And, yeah. So
real techie.
Anyways, that's my my brush with Green Team.
The Moyoc days. 2009. We started. It's like a 7-month process. And it's. I want to say it sucked just about as much as buds, but it was just as physical, but it was also more mental, as in they wanted to see how smart you were, because they wanted actual thinking shooters, wanted to be able, guys that want to be proactive. You know, they didn't want somebody that would just like, all right, this is your job, go do it. Because the mission sets for that command was way more advanced than anything that I've ever seen or heard of from anybody. So it was it's a pretty intense screening process. But yeah, you mentioned the CQB portion, man. That's like a 6 to 8 week process, and it gets tedious. Like there is probably like 2 to 3 instructors per guy when they run in the house, starting at the command, and you're starting dry pistol. And I've never been so stressed out in my life about anything than walking. Like we weren't even running into the room. We were walking into the room. There's 2 of us with a pistol that's completely empty. And I'm more stressed out than anything I've ever done in my life, because like there's like exact little lines you have to follow. And basically the biggest thing is they want to see if you're trainable and how adaptable you are, because most of the guys that screen for Green Team, or all of them, they had to have at least one wartime deployment. So you had to be Iraq or Afghanistan. Most of them had been to the command with an augment type deal. So they were either comms guys or snipers or medics. I was a breacher, and the command had tons of breachers, so I never got to augment the guys. So my first exposure was that little workup beforehand and then Green Team. But now it was intense. Luckily, I made it through that. There was about 75 seasoned team guys that went through. So most of them had at least one wartime. Most of them had 2 wartime deployments. They had been to Iraq or Afghanistan with their respective teams, and still.
Yeah, and that's what our instructor said. Like we saw a bunch of guys drop just from that CQB portion. Like I said, yeah, you're 6 to 8 weeks. I think we were there. We'll be there for 2 months, I believe, with a sniper course or something like that. And we monitored a lot of guys, and like less and less guys would show up.
Yeah.
You know, and he was kind of saying like, I don't know the secret sauce or anything to that, the Green Team, but he was like saying that's one of the big killers was CQB, or it was one of the most stressful.
Yeah.
Guys were getting dropped, and we would see them too. They would just come back, each day. And like there's maybe one or two less. And then when they graduated, which was kind of cool seeing them graduate, or at least you survived the CQB portion.
Yeah.
They were like all up in our, everyone's like, on the trucks going back, just going nuts because they got through the CQB portion. But yeah, you're right though. There was like, it was top down, but it was kind of like outside or whatever, but it was still, they had the roof, and yeah, they had a shitload of guys there. It was like, it was nuts. The amount of instructors.
Oh yeah, no, they definitely pick through everything with a fine tooth comb. They apply the stressor and pressure intentionally as much as they can. And the biggest thing, they want to see if you're going to snowball and get worse and worse, or if you'll basically get what you got going on, pick up and start getting better through a stressful situation. Because I mean, most of the missions those guys do are no-fail missions, and they're in the most shittiest situations. Obviously, we try to stack the odds in our favor, but overall, it's like really crappy situations that we end up starting off with. So, the selection process, like I said, 7 months. CQB was the most stressful part, and then you kind of move on to the different phases. They have a couple different phases, like jump, short diving one. And then after that process, you get assigned to your respective squadron. So,
and is that pretty high op tempo? Like I said, I know a little bit about the DEVGRU, but a little bit more about Delta, just because I've talked to Jamie about it a lot. But you guys pretty high op tempo.
Oh yeah,
correct. Like especially in those years.
Yeah, like they actually had to stand up another squadron right when we got there, just because the guys were getting burnt out. Talking to Jamie, you probably know at first it used to be just 90-day cycles. Like every 90 days, guys were deploying, and 90 days is 3 months, and guys are deploying 2, maybe 3 times a year for about 2 to 3 months, and then we're going out multiple times a night. So now that op tempo was pretty consistent for my time there, and we did nothing but Afghanistan deployments, some other places that I really can't talk about, but same thing. Like it was like you deploy, you get back, you immediately start doing a workup for your standby mission. Being a national mission asset, we could be anywhere within a matter of days doing a hostage rescue or something. So we were always standby, always ready kind of deal.
And like I said, it's cool and fun to talk with you guys about this, especially the tier 1 guys. how do you like separate missions? Because it's just like us in the Marine Corps. It's like, why, there's Marine Corps infantry and it's always kind of questioned, why does it exist? And then like Army has their stuff. It's like there's Delta and then there's DEVGRU. Like, how do you guys, I know they kind of switched off a little bit, but like, when the drawdown starts happening, like it did for the GWAT, not saying you can like justifying everything, but like, where do you guys start to shift? Like, Navy's maritime,
Yeah.
Army's ground force. So I imagine there's a little bit of button heads on which missions to go to or which assets being used at what time. Like, how does DEVGRU kind of, I don't say fit into all that, but you know what I mean? Like, everyone's fighting for funding and positions and missions.
Yeah. So before 9/11 and the GWAT stuff, all the teams were kind of the white side teams were divided into regions. So they had like a jungle team, a Arctic team. So those guys were trained for those mission areas and those mission sets. Obviously, when GWAT kicked off, it was the only party in town. And so basically, Damneck and CAD guys, we just would split the regions that we had. So Damneck at the time chose Afghanistan, Delta kind of chose Iraq, but we still flip-flopped and shared mission sets in places. It just depends on which was target heavy. So when I was at Team 5, we were slowly kind of slowing down in Iraq. So Damneck stuck to Afghanistan for as far as deployment cycle stuff goes. But the standby or the blowout missions, the hostage rescue stuff, that was there was always those target packets floating around, and that was just an agreement between the CO of each command, basically dividing that thing up, because we were, the two main tier 1 units right underneath, the president pretty much. And it was, hey, who's available? What kind of, sometimes we had little regions like, hey, is this closer to the region we usually operate in or not? And that's how most of the missions would kind of get divided up at the time.
Nope.
Did I lose you?
Oh, there we go. Okay. All right, came back. Good to go.
Blacked out.
That happens every once in a while. Yeah, it's like, oh my god, he's talking about stuff. Got the feed. No, yeah, because that's was something that I again talked with Jamie about, especially with the infamous, obviously, Bin Laden mission. I talked to him about that.
That was a drug deal. Honestly, that was 100% drug deal. I won't go too much into that, but that was a good little drug deal. Just because we had who was it? Was it McCraven? It was I can't remember who the Secretary of State was at the time. Or Secretary of Defense, sorry, but he was a team guy, and that was that obviously that was something the guys been tracking as far as the intelligence community and whatnot for since day one. They almost had him in Tora Bora.
I was gonna say, because Jamie was on that team in Tora Bora.
Yeah,
it's like you guys should talk, because he's a wealth of knowledge, and it's fun, especially the early days. He heard Bin Laden on the radio, and they were dropping the bombs in Tora Bora, and he gave me a full rundown of that situation over some bourbon. Yeah, it was pretty cool. But yeah, we talked about that a little bit. I was like, well, how did that kind of work? And kind of like what he said, he was like, sometimes it's just whoever's in charge at the time. Yeah. That's just what happens, or whoever's in charge of SOCOM or however that works, or JSOC.
Yeah,
it's just like,
the JSOC
and you
piece.
Make the deals.
It was one of those things. We just got back from deployment, and then a lot of that stuff kind of happened and basically got recalled immediately. But no, that piece was kind of like a drug deal kind of deal. Definitely the unicorn of all unicorns, and the command got lucky when they selected that, and and the rest is history, as they say.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Well, I remember when it all went down, because of you guys, I couldn't go to Pakistan to work, so I'm a little perturbed. they froze the visas up for. They was already having issues with Ray Davis, and he stirred some shit up. He's a contractor in the community. I think I remember the news tried to make him out as some dude that just like shot random people, but he was like, they tried snatching me up in Pakistan. He shot his way out, and then it went national news,
Yeah, I
and I
remember
was
that.
like this close to getting my visa, and I was like, motherfucker, you know. And so then we had to wait about 6-8 months, and then the Bin Laden mission happens, and then I'm like, I'm never gonna get to this fucking site. I gotta switch jobs, I gotta switch contracts, and they finally got us their visas into Pakistan. But yeah, no, that's wild. So then. I mean, so that really amplifies everything, and we can go into it a little bit if you want to. That really highlighted the community. Is that something that it's a bit of divide? I mean, that was 2011. Obviously, that's 12 years ago now.
Yeah,
But I mean,
no, it was.
you know,
Um,
that threw them right into the limelight. Everyone's talking about SEAL Team 6 and
it
everything,
was.
and
It
it was
was.
like almost like a deep dive. Yeah,
It was. It was frustrating to say the least. It was dangerous because it put not only the community on the map, but the command um, and guys that were local, knew what the command was and where we were. But outside of that, it was pretty like no one really
yeah,
cared. We you know I know we usually tease the CAD guys, and CAD guys tease us too, but majority of the community didn't like the attention, and it was like, come on, like there's a dozen different ways you could have announced that, but to just throw us under the bus like that, we
hmm
we had to do some security protocols, and a lot of guys with their families and whatnot, because the reporters started showing up. Virginia Beach got swarmed with who's who on what was going on, and like the local water holes and places that guys like to go eat. They'd get harassed because it's easy to spot a team guy, especially in those little environments. I mean, you're probably
hmm
same thing with you. You could probably spot a regular you know
oh yeah,
MARSOC guy
yeah,
compared to your regular Marines. They stand out.
hmm
So same thing. Like even though the East Coast teams are out there, you could tell the difference between a damn net guy and a regular team guy, and they'd always get
hmm
cornered in some way, shape, or form. So it was kind of tough just to be out in public every now and then for a hot minute
hmm
until something else kind of cluttered the news with whatever was going on. But it did.
hmm
It launched the community in general and the SEALs into commercial and basically the Hollywood status, I guess, because everybody
yeah,
knew what we were now, and which isn't a bad thing, but it's the attention it brought to us. So everything we did was watched underneath a microscope. Um, the dynamic kind of changed at the command from focusing on our job to a lot of garrison type stuff, and guys were getting kicked out for some things I considered like small. That guys would have never get kicked out before because there was
hmm
so much scrutiny under that. Of course, there was guys wanting to talk to the news about different aspects that weren't even involved in the mission, but kind of
yeah.
crave that attention. Uh, the books and movies and video games and stuff like that. It was like, man, um, definitely was not where I'd envisioned that
Yeah.
where things were going when I first joined. And it was one of those things that even to this day, sometimes I don't introduce myself as a former Navy SEAL to many folks. I just kind of stick as vague as I can because I don't want to be asked a bunch of questions
hmm
unless I invite that kind of deal. So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's the thing too is like, and it's funny too. You think about it, like I don't even remember. You always, in fact, I don't even think I knew what Team 6 was. Before the raid. You know what I mean? Like I lived in the world of the Marine Corps and then SEALs, and then even like Delta, like the Delta stuff. I didn't know really anything about other than like Black Hawk Down.
yeah,
And I knew that they were the elites, but that to me was like just like anybody else who was like, oh, that must be special forces, or that everyone just thinks you're the special forces or special operations or some shit like
yeah,
that. And I remember that getting thrown into the limelight. And what was also those weird years too, where uh, I got out in 2009, and the support for like the military and veterans was like, it was like all time high.
yeah.
I mean, you had modern, even like the video games, Modern Warfare 2 really like blew up. You had what was the other one? It was
Medal of
the
Honor ones.
Medal of
Yeah,
Honor. Yeah, which I actually like playing. That's on my nerd side, but like that was surrounding Roberts Ridge,
yeah.
and then I know there was controversy behind that because I think they were advising or something like that. There's some stuff that went down, and yeah, it's just like all it like just kind of like threw into the limelight like everything, and it was kind of, yeah, and then that was before the Bin Laden raid, and then it's boom, that happens, and then it's off to the races. But Yeah, I can see the frustration with the command because, like I said, I wouldn't known shit about Team Six at all until after the raid. I knew about the SEALs. That was it. That was always, white side SEALs. We were always, I wouldn't say in competition with them, but you would always, my buddies worked with them or we worked with them or whatever, and you're like, oh yeah, they're decent, but you never quite knew the breakdowns, just like everything else.
Yeah.
But
No.
I knew about more about ODAs and SF than I did about Team Six.
Yeah. That
But
was the thing.
yes,
It's like you knew there was a wizard, but you didn't know exactly what was behind the curtain, and that was kind of
yeah,
the
exactly, yeah,
prestige behind
yeah,
it. Like when I got there,
mm-hmm.
obviously I was like, oh, this is 10 times more than what I thought it was. This is great.
Yeah.
And then that kind of made national news and shifted a whole lot of mindset and focus. It was frustrating for at least the operator side of the house, but then things are changing and growing, and the mission kind of slowly dissolving from the wartime solutions to whatever small little stuff going around. So like Syria and different parts of Africa, we're doing stuff. But no, it was tough because it was hard to get a low profile or continue to have a low profile just because of all the attention it brought to the command, to the community
mm-hmm.
as well.
Mm-hmm. And is that something that you guys saw that was as the war started winding down, or I'm sure you still have friends that are into, and then the dynamics changing, like where do you find work, but you know what I mean? Like you guys are direct action, but what happens when you don't have to do direct action more? You guys kind of take more on the surveillance observation roles. Does it, the teams kind of get, because again, like I've seen more and more of, just again talking with on the Delta side of the house, what they have to task force, or the Army, I should say, Task Force Orange or TFO, and it's like it almost starts coming down to singletons and like, okay, yeah, we have one guy that's doing this or this. You guys feel that as well, or does the Navy have assets like that, or like how do they kind of find that mission then in post GWAT officially now, in peacetime?
Well, that's what I think the Navy or especially the tier one units do well is adapting to the next, what we call the next ridge line or the next foreseeable mm-hmm. conflict, or even non-conflict stuff. Because before GWAT kicked off, those commands were doing stuff in Kosovo and doing all those mm-hmm. pieces that no one heard about. Like there was no one reporting in the news about all the mission stuff and they were doing. Like you said, the stuff like in Black Hawk Down, at the time, no one probably was tracking that piece, but obviously when mm-hmm. time kind of got out and guys were talking about it, stuff like that, the command and Delta were doing a lot of that stuff. Not being in now and not want to talk about it too much, I'm pretty sure it's the same thing that it used to be like in the mm-hmm. mid 90s is they're still working, doing stuff across the globe that protects America's interest and the American citizens to prevent the next, mm-hmm. Hopefully to prevent the next 9/11. A lot of the stuff that we did was high profile targets that if we didn't dispatch or capture or whatever on the battlefield would have poured into the next big attack, whether it be, in America or, allies, so mm-hmm. definitely working with those guys, working with foreign allies, and other tier one units, SAS, SBS guys. Mm-hmm. Those guys are always working, so they definitely make a job for themselves one way or another.
Mm-hmm. So we can kind of shift that then. So now you're starting to get out, or you get out. Like, when did you retire? I know there's, what was your reason for retirement? Where were you kind of after that?
Even our workup cycles were pretty intense. I had 2 bad jumps that ultimately broke both my legs. One jump was jump was the left leg. 2 years later was the right one. Just work up basic stuff, and some bad little. The first one was there's kind of a bad spot. The wind kind of pushed us off, and I went through a tree. And then hit some pavement. And the second one, I ran into an ISU, which is an individual storage unit that we used to store all our gear. That was next to the drop zone. Mm-hmm. Definitely was jumping above my expertise, but obviously pushing the envelope, trying to get better is what we're good at. I smashed into it and broke my right one.
God damn.
It was gross. Yeah, lots of surgeries, lots of time at Portsmouth Naval Hospital. Mm-hmm. And then I pushed through the pain, but I pulled a few more times, and the had a lot of hardware, like plates and screws in my legs, and they would shift when I deployed because of, run around the mountains, all that kit and gear. It's rough on, just your normal joints. So if you have injuries and whatnot, especially ones that required major surgery, it's beyond uncomfortable. The Navy kind of pulled me aside, or, docs at the command. They're like, hey, you're going to have repeated surgeries, and you're probably not going to walk when you're 40. So we're going to go ahead and medically retire you. So that 14 years in the Navy, I got medically retired. And it was a good thing too. I kind of was fighting it initially because you're in the mix and in the heat with the guys I was with. I was like, man, I can't leave this. This is everything I've worked for my whole Navy career. But outside looking in, I was like, man, I would have been more of a liability than an asset, just because of some of the injuries I had and some of the like stuff that I was wearing to do my job, like different prosthetic type stuff. I was like, man, it would take one minor injury that would, lead me down. And I was, I'm a decent sized guy, so I wouldn't expect somebody to, because I twisted my ankle because of previous injuries, to carry me out. I'm 225 now, 230 in the teams, and with all my kit, and I was a heavy gunner too. I was probably like 310 helicopter weight. And the running joke after my last deployment was, if anything happened to me, just give me a grenade and let me be. Because I was, just a bigger guy, and it's like, man, like I mentioned before, it's a younger guy's game, and especially with injuries, kind of just accelerated that mileage on the old Mustang here. So, no, and just
I was gonna say that kind of like what you guys do. Infantry's that way too. I think the only people that do well in that is the SF guys, because they're like, you see them deploying, they look like their dads, and they're like, I love this, we can go all day. They deployed like 8 times, and then I don't know when the last time they ran a 2-miler, but they're just I feel like that the FID mission or the combat advisor roles are a little more diplomatic, and I want to say don't move slow, but I agree with you. Like infantry is like, oh my god, that beats the shit out of you. And then what you guys do, especially the direct action, always go, it's like that just beats the hell out of your body for forever, and that's it catches up with you. It is a young man's game.
It is. No, it's crazy. Yeah. My former CEO called it the burning Ferris wheel. That thing is going to be spinning so fast, it's on fire. And once you step off, you don't realize how intense it was until you do. And then once your body starts relaxing, then you realize how many injuries you actually do have. I remember signing those papers and kind of starting my out processing from the Navy, like realizing how much I did hurt from just normal wear and tear, my back, my neck, my shoulders, hips, not to include all the massive injuries I had on my legs and my back in general. So no, it was a good deal.
So what was that transition like then, going from, like I said, doing all the high speed, but you're, like I said, finding your way? How did that, I know there's opportunities more with the tier 1 guys, but like even then people struggle. So like, where did you kind of want to find your niche, or where'd you want to go and whatnot? What were you thinking?
Man, I was bitter. I wanted to move out of Virginia Beach as quickly as possible. I moved down to Oklahoma, close to family, and was going to do the weapons and trainings piece just because it was the easy button. But I was, bitter. I didn't want to leave the command. I didn't want to leave the Navy, and it sucked just mentally. Just kind of, it felt like losing a whole family in like a plane accident or something, because those guys are still working and whatnot. I could reach out to them every now and then, but man, those guys are so busy half the time. I remember being in, like, responding to actual family members' text messages or phone calls. It was like, I'll get back to you in about a week or so. I'm no shit training or doing stuff, and I didn't have time to do that. It's the same thing with those guys. So even if I'd reach out and be like, hey man, how you guys doing or whatnot, I still wouldn't hear back from a week or two. And it wasn't on them. It was just the burning Ferris wheel, as my CEO called it. So it was tough mentally, physically. Obviously, everything started hurting more and more. So finding that niche post Navy, it was tough because, man, I didn't want to do anything else. Like, I figured I'd accomplished everything that I was setting out to do, and there was nothing else that could even come close to what I was doing. So it's depressing, really.
Yeah. And so, what kind of got your way working with Warfighter Scuba and like that foundation and volunteering there?
So the only thing that I could do that didn't cause me extreme amount of pain was it being in the water, swimming and whatnot. I got the VA newsletter that kind of highlighted Warfighter Scuba, and I was like, man, I'd really love to do this because it's something completely different, but also gets back to why I joined the Navy in general. Is to learn how to scuba dive. I thought would be a cool idea. So I reached out to Nick and Warfighter, and I was like, "Hey, man, this is who I am. I'm a Purple Heart recipient. I want to do more than just kind of go through your program. I'd like to help out in a way, whatever that may be, the instructor process or whatnot, or just being a dive buddy to different veterans because I've done a lot of dives." So yeah, no, Nick luckily responded. He said he reached out to some other buddies of his to make sure I was a real team guy, because you always get those guys that say, "Yeah, I was a Navy SEAL," and of course they were like either a support guy or quit buds, in indoc phase, but still think they made it through the process. He reached back out and goes, "Man, you were the fastest yes I got from guys saying they were team guys than anybody I've ever known." So I went out. Nick and I hung out for that week in Roatan. Not only just diving, because he had to get my open water certification up to date. We did all the dive master, dive guide stuff, and the accelerated program, I guess, because I had 300 scuba dives under my belt. Most of them are rebreather stuff, and at night, not seeing anything. But I knew the whole process of the scuba diving stuff and the physics, because that's a whole 2-month process in buds, and it's something that we continuously refreshed in the teams. So yeah, no, Nick and I actually hit it off pretty quick, and I was like, "Hey man, I'm here for any way you want me to." So he kept inviting me down to help run trips and put me in the instructor category, and so every time he gets a chance or needs me, volunteer my time and help guys out.
How long have you been doing that?
About 2 years now. It's been awesome. Like I said, it's the only thing I can actually do that causes me zero pain. That includes walking. So no, I enjoy it. I enjoy it immensely. It's quiet in the water, and it's good to see guys that have previous injuries or hurt all the time like I do, when they actually get in the water and actually able to enjoy themselves and quiet their mind. So.
So there's how often do you dive in then in between, or is it just strictly with the Warfighter Scuba?
Every now and then. Right now I'm in Texas, not a whole lot unless I go down to the coast. But I usually try to stay plugged in with the Warfighter, because they try to do those trips at least once a month. Next year they're actually going to have a bunch of them twice a month, and that's just trying to get more guys through and help them out. And those are pretty dive heavy when I run them anyways, because I'll try to do 4 or 5 dives a day. I'm all about that.
That's very true. Yeah, I can attest to that.
Nick accused me of overworking guys. Was like, "Man, I'd rather be in the water than talk about being in the water." So, yeah, no, I get so many good dives during that week. Usually satisfies my thirst for that until the next trip. But yeah, I'd say once. I say once. We're going. I do some type of diving trip once every other month.
Oh, nice. Okay. And then also while doing that, then you're also the training director for GBRS Group. So how did you kind of get into that? Or, I mean, the guys, and then what's that kind of like then in this atmosphere now in 2023, shooting courses and whatnot?
Yeah. So DJ and I were in the squadron together. Him and Cole started the GBRS Group originally to train guys. It's kind of the same thing, flat range stuff and CQB for military and law enforcement mainly. Back in 2019, and then COVID hit, and obviously anything physical had to go to the wayside. And so they started doing stuff like content, online stuff. And that was right when that whole Patreon stuff started getting started. And so they did some gear as well. Did the riser for the sight riser for the rifle, and their gun belt and whatnot. DJ was doing skateboard stuff. He was a big skateboarder before he joined the Navy. So his skateboard piece was doing pretty good as well. And it expanded to his internet stuff. He did that interview with Sean Ryan. That kind of put DJ on the map and GBRS on the map, like on a big scale. But when they started doing training stuff again, they invited me out because I always when I'm in town, I talk to him constantly, talk to DJ, and like, hey man, if you ever want to do any instruction stuff, let me know. I'll jump on and be a guest instructor. Mm-hmm. So we did what we call a knowledge transfer course event. Early February of this year was the first one, and that one actually did pretty well. A lot of people were interested in that. It's like a 3-day event. Guys come out, they do fitness, they get some good nutrition stuff, and we spend good blocks of training on the flat range doing rifle pistol manipulation, and we'll touch on some like home defense CQB, but nothing too crazy because depending on the clientele, mm-hmm. We're not going to train civilians how to do combat clearance and stuff like that, or assaulting a target, because it's A, they don't need to know that type of stuff. It's kind of a waste of their time. But B, some of that stuff is proprietary to military and law enforcement for a reason. Mm-hmm. I know we got initially got a whole lot of pushback from guys that were still active duty, just because, you never go out and just, start advertising what you used to do and kind of be thrust in the limelight. But kind of talking to DJ and those guys, I got into it, that what they were kind of putting out was actually good stuff. It wasn't stuff that we did in the military. We weren't giving away all our, community secrets, as some people like to do with, like say books and video games or whatnot. It was just mm-hmm. good training, with good guys. And it's a good, mostly mindset, mentality stuff. And so far we've done 4 of them this year. We got like 6 scheduled for next year. And those are pretty good. And the same thing, since their popularity, they've got different law enforcement units and military units that want to set up their training. So the training piece kind of picked up back up for them, and they reached out summer and were like, hey, we need somebody to head our training department because we need an actual department with everything else we got going on. So they hired me on full time. And now just
awesome
field phone calls trying to convince people that they need to train with us, and we put them on the schedule. We're already gotten packed till about spring, or actually no, summer of next year. Now we got guys coming on like every week doing something, so it's good stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome. Hell yeah. Yeah. And so do you guys, I know you, like I said, you're doing civilian law enforcement. Do you guys kind of go back and forth then? Because I know some, like when you guys were in, Dev Group, did you have third-party contractors that kind of train you, or was it like the mix? Sometimes the Army does that with like snipers and contractors, or, former, like, you guys still kind of do a little bit of that, or is that just completely?
No, we do the military piece as well. It just depends on what unit is want to do. I mean, even at the command, we would bring in civilians that were subject matter experts on whatever we were training, whether it be shooting, driving, surveillance. We'd go seek out whoever the guy is that was his life. He lived and breathed it, and we'd bring him in, and we'd have him for a week or two, and we'd get as much as we can from him, put it in our toolbox, and try to use what we could in mission sets. And so, just like military units now, we haven't done any training with our former command, but we do training with Rangers and different Air Force units and stuff like that. And it's basically just getting them more proficient in their weapons handling, because a lot of guys, I know Marines probably have it better than us in the Navy, but graduating from boot camp and going to like a school or MOS school, depending on what it was, if your job required you to carry a firearm and there wasn't very much actual training, you did, and you just kind of did brush up stuff. Like, so for instance, Master at Arms, we had like a week on the range, like a few days on the range with the Beretta M9. And we didn't really train. We just learned how it worked and that we could point it and shoot it at a piece of paper. And then, if I would have stayed in the Master at Arms world, that was the extent of my actual training I would have been. It's like, oh, I know how to use it, or I know how to shoot it, but I don't really know how to use it. So a lot of law enforcement and military units are kind of the same thing, depending on what their background and specialty is. And we went through so many different shooting schools and so many operations and missions where we had to utilize our weapon systems. We just kind of want to pass that to help out, because our biggest thing, especially with the law enforcement side of the house, those guys don't get enough good training. And most of those guys, their heart's in the right place and they want to be the best they can, but they have to depend on their department or county or city to give them funding or provide them training. And so it's tough because, they don't know what they don't know, as they say. And some of those guys, just making them more capable would just make them, better overall as professionals. So.
Yeah. Did you guys ever over the years have some pretty wild guys you brought on, like as a civilian contractor, like an SME expert that you're like, oh my God, this guy?
Yeah, we had some extreme. I'm not going to call out any specific blocks of training names, but sometimes we'd get some guys that, like I said, the Steven Seagal types that were they were good at their craft, but at the same time they were kind of an extreme weirdo, and we do the course and we'd like, we probably won't end up using anything that he told us because it just doesn't make sense in our world, but hey, you know what, good for him. We definitely would. I'm pretty sure with the contractor side of the world, you probably got in some guys you're like, why is this guy here, like what is his purpose?
We had, I won't go into details either, but I don't think they do it anymore. But we had, I'm sure I know your community, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about, but I won't get into the details. But there's a little martial arts section that we had to go through. It was pretty, I remember going through, and this was on the static, like the advanced static side for the CIA static was really good. We did like ass loads of shooting. Like that's when I learned how to shoot with a Glock. And me and my buddy were top shooters, and it was the same application as like a rifle. You just kind of apply it to the Glock, and obviously with some other stuff, but like it was awesome. Like we did a shitload of shooting, EO techs, like just, it was, flat range, but it was like, it was nuts how much shooting we did. And then driving, we did a lot of cool driving, cold weather driving. They would have like a sprinkler system that would shoot out water, and it was like amazing. It was this crazy, amazing 18-day package for like advanced static security. And we did have a section that was for hand-to-hand combat, and we were there for about maybe 4 days or something like that. And I remember we go through, and like I said, I won't get into super detail, but it was the, kind of the crab walk, you kind of. So I won't get into super details because everyone's gonna be like, exactly where it is. And I remember being like, all right, okay, like we'll, and then we kind of looked at each other, and then we did some of the moves. And like, okay, I understand, like in theory. But then the whole time, the rest of the training, we just would like walk around like that, just kind of like through the chow hall.
That's funny. That was my first introduction to combatives as an early SQT guy, right. And that was because they have it's weapons combative stuff that they were doing, and same thing. We'd walk around with our strike ready, and because the first introduction, they had the civilian guys and the instructors that were active duty team guys. And, of course, the guy would stand in his little position, and they kick and stuff, and like, try to kick me in the balls, and you try to kick him, and he'd do something funky.
Yep, he did that.
And it was the most ridiculous thing. It was like,
try to kick me in the balls.
I'm not going to be walking around Iraq doing this, but I guess if I get in a bar fight and I jump in this position, people think I'm crazy and they won't mess with me.
We actually, my buddy stayed in the program for like 6 years. Like so I only did one rotation, and then they shut our site down. So then I know it was the longest running black site in the GWAT. It was the first one set up right after 9/11. And so right before I leave the site, they're like, don't worry about it. Or I said something that's like, hey, they're like, this place isn't going anywhere. Like blah, blah, blah. We'll see. I was like, cool. It's not the sexiest, but it was like, it's fine. Like I'm making good money. I get home and they shut it down. My buddy's like, we're shutting the site down. So there was like a whole thing. I was like, I waited 8 months to deploy, and I do one rotation, it gets shut down. So I had to move to WIPs. I moved out of Department of State. But my buddy stayed in the program though for about 6 years, I believe. And I asked about that. I was like, hey, how was that martial arts program? And he goes, or someone else I talked about that. They were like, the client showed up and was like, what the fuck is this? And then I guess they shut it down. I don't know if it still exists or not, but I guess somebody from the agency showed up and they're like, "What the hell are you doing?" but as you know, you were trained in it, so it went on
Yeah, I
for
did.
a while, and then I knew we had like one other SEAL guy in our program that was like, "Yeah, we learned this
Yeah.
years ago," and I was like, "Oh, okay, cool, must be somewhat
Yeah.
decent or
No,
something." But yeah,
we
but then they
started
shut it down.
transferring
Yeah.
over to, because that was before the UFC and MMA started getting real big. So we
Yeah, it
we ended
was.
up
Yeah, yeah.
not using that program anymore and shifting over to some of the combative side with that. Um, and no, I like the MMA side of the house just because the
Mm-hmm.
diversity it had. We applied it to some of the. We had a group called SEOC Tactical Group that was awesome. That would apply the UFC side of the house minus the sports side. And a lot of those guys
Mm-hmm.
had great backgrounds in actual fighting, street fights type stuff, and just getting in scraps in general. So improvised weapons, stuff like that. Those guys were instrumental in some of the training we did, because we would vary from direct action to low vis type stuff to just about everything,
Mm-hmm.
and just their experience was great in our
Mm-hmm.
training realm, especially some of the actual like weapons fighting stuff that we did. So if anybody would ask me like, hey, what type of like combatives or like if you want an actual like weapons combatives, I always tell them to go check out SEOC, the STG guys.
And so they open to the public then too, as
Kind of
well.
not really. Those guys,
Oh,
they're
okay.
very specific on who they train, rightfully so. Last thing you want is some
Mm-hmm.
guy rolling around like a knife or a pistol, thinking that they're John Wick. But they usually stick to guys that do it professionally. So law enforcement units, military units, like
Mm-hmm.
your guys' side of the house. I know that some guys they asked me to
Mm-hmm.
help with a contract they got recently, and I was like, I wish I could, but I'm unavailable, because I still talk to those guys pretty frequently.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, that group is actually a pretty good little group. Just even their like LOT, they called it logical order of thinking. Just their mindset stuff is bar none some of the really good stuff. And we use that and we pass that to our clients as well, with
Mm-hmm.
the GBRS groups. So because most of it
Mm-hmm.
is about preparedness and how mentally and willing you are, and then obviously tying in the capability piece, because everybody thinks they're going to rise to the occasion when something goes down, but you're only going to kind of come to your level of training in that event. And if you have
Mm-hmm.
zero training and just kind of watch TV all the time, then that's basically what you're going to do. You
Mm-hmm.
get your ass handed to you while thinking about, man, everybody loves Raymond's on tonight. Hopefully I can see it with my good eye.
Yeah, I can't wait to watch that
I don't
reruns
know.
of The Office.
My Netflix special.
uh, yeah. No, that's awesome, bro. Yeah, absolutely. So, well, this is awesome. We typically do an hour, so we blew past the hour mark here. Where can people find you? And on Instagram or on
So
socials
I
or
don't take
whatever.
Instagram super seriously. So I make a lot of goofy videos, but I do touch on my work stuff too now. Bearded Frogman.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll have some of my diving stuff and the GBRS KTC stuff that we do in the events there, as well as some silly little tank top videos.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah,
Now, are you selling those
yeah,
tank
no,
tops? I
I'm
know
making
we would talk
like
about that. Yeah.
making some tank tops. Nothing in high demand or high order, but it is a time filler, and it
Mm-hmm.
definitely gets people in the mood. So quick
Yeah.
story, so I don't drink too much longer. So Tank Top Friday came about in Afghanistan, about 2012. It was with the squadrons. As you know, every day where there's exactly the same. So different people would do different things
Mm-hmm.
to mark what day of the week it was, just because there's no weekends off. It's not like oh, man, it's Friday, let's go out drinking. Not some of the stuff that we were doing
Mm-hmm.
anyways. It was like, hey, do we have a mission tonight? Yes or no? Yes. All right, we're loading shit up, or no, then we're just doing surveillance and trying to figure out what our next mission is. But every Friday we wear tank tops just because it was a goofy thing to do. So one Friday we were actually briefing the JSOC 5-star general there on one of our missions. Being a tier 1 unit, we always briefed him directly on what was going on. And didn't get the memo that we were all supposed to be in camis and official tops and whatnot. And it was Friday. So I walked in with my tank top, and of course we're in the big jock. There's everybody there with the support personnel, the squadrons, and this big, massive screen with the general on there, and our CO and troop commanders briefing what we got going on and the target we're looking at. And of course there's me standing around with this big black tank top on, and I'm looking around already feeling out of place, and my team leader's giving me this look like, hey motherfucker, you should have got the memo, you're going to get your ass chewed later. So it kind of stops and everybody's quiet for a second. Everybody started looking at me, and I'm like, what? It's Tank Top Friday. And no one really laughed. There was some snickering, and I got a smile out of the 5-star general. So it was our thing for every Friday to kind of mark Fridays was Tank Top Fridays.
Mm-hmm. So did you ask?
I did, but it was decently worth it. I always try to lighten the mood. That kind of helped me get through a lot of the sucky training in buds and green team and just situations overseas, was making light out of dark shit. Because it's one of those things. Hey, it could be worse, and then we'd start imagining how much worse it could be. You get absolutely. It. Most guys in the military do get it, the little dark humor piece, because if not, instantly we go insane. So, no, small stuff like that.
100%.
But no, Tank Top Friday kind of became a thing, and I bring it on wherever I go.
Yeah, can people go? Yeah, can people buy your brand? I know you've made a few designs.
It's pretty simple.
Beardedfrogman.com
is the tank top website. I'm trying to put up new designs, but currently there's a little bit of story and history behind each one. The most recent ones I made was the Black Ops ones. So it's just a tank top. It has the different branches. I put Space Force in there too. Got to give those guys some love. But right now they don't have a special operations unit in Space Force. At least not telling anybody. So
I know they recognize them I was at the American Veterans Center, and it is weird. And there was like 2 cadets there. It was all a bunch of cadets and a few celebrities, and then they big gala thing, and the Space Force had and I'm like, that's right, the Space Force, but they have their own like theme song.
I gotta Google that. I haven't heard the theme song.
Yeah. It was, I don't even remember what it was, but it was like, oh shit, like there's words to it. There's like, a whole thing. And it's like Space Force. And Rob Riggle's like, hey, where's our Space Force? There's like 2 people like, yeah. He's like two fucking Space Force cadets. So, but I keep forgetting about that, and I'm like, man, that would be kind of fun. I don't know, just to see what their job offering is.
It's a legitimate branch, because the satellites, stuff that they are watching and trying to protect and it's dangerous. Like intercontinental missiles, they go into the atmosphere, and satellite stuff, and freaking sharks with laser beams. That's the way everything's kind of moving, and it makes sense why they stood them up. But it was funny, of course, when they first came out, everybody's like, "Oh, we're going to protect people from aliens. What's going on here?" Independence Day, but Marine. But,
yeah. I think you said the cross that wonder what their job in JSOC. You have to ask your buddies.
Do they have
like there's one nerd that shows up like
is there a special? Are they basing off the Halo game series? Guys run around calling them Master Chief.
Exactly. Yeah. It's gonna be like one guy that they just sent over that just didn't want to be there, and they're like, we don't want to go to the meeting, and it's just gonna be like DEVGRU and Delta, and he's like some 20-year-old kid like, I don't fucking know why I'm here. And he's like, I have to represent Space Force. They're all at the chow hall right now. It's steak and lobster night. They're not gonna miss it, so they sent my boot ass over. Oh yeah, absolutely. All right, man. Well, thanks for coming on. This is awesome. And again, socials are Bearded Frogman on Instagram, and then beardedfrogman.com. They can snatch up your sweet tank tops.
Hell yeah.
So awesome. All right.
Thanks, Ethan. I appreciate it, man.